Evelyn had only one dream in life, a dream so dear to her heart that she held on to it even when reality screamed otherwise. All she ever wanted was to become a doctor and save lives, to be among the few in white coats who brought hope to the hopeless and healing to the broken. It wasn't just a passing wish, it was a burning desire that lived inside her. She would often sit by the roadside in the evenings, watching the sun sink into the horizon, dreaming of herself walking through hospital corridors, stethoscope hanging around her neck, bringing smiles to worried faces. But the condition of her family said otherwise. Life for Evelyn and her family was not kind. Eating 3 meals in a day was a luxury they could hardly afford. Most days, it was either breakfast and dinner, or just one meager meal hurriedly shared among the family, stretched thin to fill empty stomachs. Sometimes they boiled yam and licked palm oil with it, grateful even for that. Talking about going to medical school seemed like a fairy tale, something reserved for those who were born with silver spoons in their mouths, not for people like Evelyn, who had never even seen a spoon that wasn't scratched and bent. Her father, Mr. Ease, was an ordinary vulcanizer who patched and mended tires under the hot sun by the roadside. His makeshift workshop was nothing more than a wooden table, an old umbrella patched in many places, and a few rusty tools. On good days, he might make up to 1,000 naira, but on bad days, which were many, he would sit all day and not make a single kobo. It was a job that broke the body and humbled the spirit, but he did it faithfully because he had mouths to feed and dreams, not his own, but those of his children to sustain. Her mother, Mrs. Ease, was no better off. She was a fruit seller, the type who would wake up before the cock crowed to travel to remote villages where fruits were cheaper. She would haggle and bargain with the farmers, sometimes trekking long distances, just to gather enough produce. She would then return to the city, her back bent under the weight of baskets, her hands calloused and rough. In the city markets, she would spread out her fruits, oranges, bananas, pineapples, sometimes mangoes when they were in season, and call out to passing buyers in a voice already hoarse from exhaustion. Every day was a gamble. Some days the fruits sold quickly. Other days they rotted under the sun, and her efforts went unrewarded. Yet, despite the hardships, Evelyn dared to dream. So when word spread around their neighborhood that a newly opened company was hiring, Evelyn and her friends wasted no time. The jobs were not glamorous. They were looking for cleaners, people to sweep floors, scrub toilets, wipe tables. Jobs that many would sneer at and call ordinary. But Evelyn did not sneer. For her, it was not just an ordinary cleaning job. It was a stepping stone, a ladder out of the pit her family was trapped in. Without hesitation, she applied. She filled out the form with hands that trembled not from fear, but from excitement. In her mind, she already saw herself saving every kobo from her salary, stuffing it into a metal box hidden under her bed, watching it grow slowly but surely until one day she could pay her way into medical school. Evelyn prepared for the interview as if her life depended on it, and in many ways, it did. She washed and ironed her best dress, a simple blue gown that had seen better days but was still neat and presentable. She polished her worn-out shoes until they gleamed as if they were new. She practiced answering questions in front of a cracked mirror, rehearsing polite smiles and respectful greetings. Every night, she prayed, not just for the job, but for strength. Strength to endure, strength to rise, strength to keep believing even when everything else told her to give up. The night before the interview, she barely slept. Her mind raced with thoughts of what could be, of the life that could finally begin if only she could take this first step. To anyone else, it was just a cleaner's job. To Evelyn, it was the beginning of a miracle. On the morning of the interview, Evelyn and her friends walked briskly along the busy, dusty road, and vehicles honked impatiently as they rushed past one another. Evelyn clutched her small bag tightly, her heart pounding with a mix of nervousness and hope. She had prayed all night for this opportunity, and now it was finally here. She could almost see herself being called for the job, starting work and saving towards her dreams. But abruptly, something happened that made her stop dead in her tracks. Right before their eyes, a speeding car came out of nowhere, knocked a woman down with a loud, sickening thud, and sped off without even slowing down. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Her whole body froze. She stared in horror as the woman's body hit the ground heavily and lay motionless. A scream tore from Evelyn's mouth before she could even think. "God of mercy," she cried out, her voice trembling with fear and disbelief. Without thinking, she tried to run towards the scene, her instincts taking over. But her friends quickly held her back. Their hands gripped her arms firmly, pulling her away. "Let's go to the interview," one of her friends said urgently, her eyes darting around nervously. "People will help her." Evelyn struggled against their hold, her voice rising with desperation. "Can't you see the way they are passing by?" "They don't care," she answered, almost shouting. Her eyes were wide with tears that hadn't yet fallen, and her whole body trembled with anger and helplessness. Her friends exchanged glances, then one of them said sharply, "Well, we are going. It seems like this interview is not important to you." Evelyn looked at them, her heart breaking. She needed the job more than anyone, more than anything, but how could she walk away? How could she turn her back on a dying woman when her whole dream in life was to save lives? "It is," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "It is important to me, but that woman's life is more important than anything. Let's save life first." Before she could even finish speaking, her friends turned their backs on her and walked away without hesitation, disappearing quickly into the crowd, leaving her standing there alone. Evelyn stood at the spot, torn between two heavy choices. The interview was calling out to her, a job that could change her life and that of her struggling family. But in front of her was a life hanging by a thread. How could she call herself a future doctor if she couldn't even stop to help someone in need? As these thoughts warred inside her, Evelyn's heart made the decision for her. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and moved quickly towards the scene. When she got there, her heart broke even more. People were standing around, their phones raised, snapping pictures and recording videos. Some were posting online, typing with excitement as if they had just witnessed an entertaining show. No one cared enough to even check if the woman was breathing. Some even boldly wrote on their social media handles that the woman was dead. But Evelyn was not moved by their indifference. She reached the woman and immediately waved a tricycle down with desperate energy. Thank God, at least, they hadn't taken the woman's bag or her cell phone. Some had hovered nearby, probably waiting for a chance to steal it, but none had acted yet. Evelyn quickly picked up the woman's bag and her cell phone, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. The tricycle driver, seeing her determination, jumped down from his vehicle and helped her lift the woman carefully into the back seat. People stared at Evelyn as she worked, some whispering, some still recording, but no one stepped forward to assist. Evelyn ignored them all. She climbed into the tricycle, cradling the woman's head gently on her lap as the driver sped off towards the nearest hospital. Evelyn didn't look back. She didn't think about the interview anymore. At that moment, all that mattered to her was saving the life that everyone else had abandoned. When they got to the hospital, Evelyn didn't waste a second. As soon as the tricycle came to a stop in front of the emergency entrance, she jumped down and screamed with all the strength in her. Her voice echoed through the hospital compound, drawing the attention of the nurses and doctors inside. Workers rushed out immediately, some running, others fast-walking towards the scene, curiosity and urgency written all over their faces. Evelyn stood there panting, her chest rising and falling heavily. She stared at the doctors as they came out one after the other, their white coats fluttering slightly as they moved quickly. In that moment, Evelyn's heart squeezed painfully. Her eyes clung to their white uniforms. She imagined herself wearing that same white coat, saving lives, giving hope. That had always been her dream, the only dream she ever had, to be a doctor, to save lives, to make a difference. The hospital workers moved fast, lifting the woman gently but urgently onto a stretcher and wheeling her into the emergency room. Evelyn stood there watching them, her heart beating fast. She clasped the woman's bag and phone tightly against her chest, refusing to let go. Moments later, one of the nurses came back out and approached her hurriedly. "You have to make a deposit of 50,000 naira before we can proceed further," the nurse said briskly, holding out a payment slip towards her. Without a second thought, Evelyn reached into her small bag and pulled out her ATM card. Her hands shook slightly, but she didn't allow herself to hesitate. She followed the nurse to the payment point, quickly inserted her card into the machine, and made the payment. 50,000 naira. Gone. It was only after the transaction was complete, after she collected the receipt and slipped it into her bag, that Evelyn sat down slowly on the hard bench by the hospital corridor. She placed the woman's bag beside her and stared into space, her mind racing with troubling thoughts. What had she just done? She had just used part of the money her mother had been painfully saving in her account for their house rent. Money they had been gathering little by little for months, sacrificing food, sacrificing comfort, just to have a roof over their heads. Now it was gone. Just like that. What would she tell her mother when the time came to pay? What would she say? How would she explain that she had spent the house rent saving a stranger? Evelyn buried her face in her palms, her chest tightening with fear and regret. Again, she thought bitterly about the interview she had missed. That one chance. That golden opportunity to get a job and start saving for her education. It was gone too. What would she tell her mother now? She kept asking herself the same question over and over again, but no answer came. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, a soft voice interrupted her. She looked up to see a female doctor standing before her, a gentle smile on her face. "She is out of danger now," the doctor said kindly, her voice warm and reassuring. Evelyn blinked, her heart filling with relief. A small, sweet smile broke out on her tired face. She smiled, not just because the woman was safe, but because she couldn't help but admire the doctor standing in front of her. Her white coat, her calmness, her kindness, that was exactly who Evelyn wanted to be. That was exactly what she had always dreamed of becoming. Someone who saved lives. Someone who could give people such good news. She is out of danger now. Evelyn nodded silently, her throat too tight with emotion to speak. She rose slowly to her feet and followed the doctor into the hospital. They walked down a corridor, the walls lined with faded posters about health and hygiene, until they reached the small emergency room where the woman had been taken. Evelyn stepped inside quietly. The woman was still sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady now. She lay there, looking fragile but safe. Evelyn looked at the woman's phone again. It was locked with a password. She tried a few combinations, but nothing worked. There was no way to reach any of her family or relatives unless the woman woke up and unlocked the phone herself. Otherwise, they would have to take the phone out and try to flash it, which would erase everything. Evelyn sat down beside the bed, feeling the weight of everything she had done resting heavily on her shoulders. But even in her worries, she knew deep inside that she had made the right choice. "Nurse, I will be back. Let me go and get food for her before she wakes up," Evelyn said, her voice soft but firm as she approached one of the nurses on duty. The nurse, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, turned to look at her and asked curiously, "Is she your mother?" Evelyn shook her head immediately. "No, she is not. I will be back," she answered shortly and walked away without saying another word. She didn't have the strength or patience for unnecessary questions and explanations. All that was on her mind was the woman lying there, helpless and hungry. As she stepped out of the hospital gate, she quickened her pace, eager to get home and find something to bring back before the woman regained consciousness. At home, the compound was quiet, save for the occasional noise of pots and pans from the backyard. Evelyn pushed the small gate open and walked in. Her mother was already back from the market. She was in the kitchen, putting away the little she was able to sell. Her father was inside the room, probably resting after the day's work. As soon as her mother saw her, she dropped the basket she was carrying and rushed towards her. "Evelyn, where have you been?" her mother asked, concern heavy in her voice. "Mum, I was at the hospital. A woman was knocked along the road by a car, and I took her to the hospital," Evelyn answered, breathing heavily from the long walk. "Jesus, is she all right now?" her mother screamed, her hands flying to her head in worry. "The doctor said that she is out of danger, but she hasn't opened her eyes yet," Evelyn explained, her voice low and tired. Her mother heaved a deep sigh of relief and sat down on the wooden chair close by. She wiped her face with the edge of her wrapper and looked at Evelyn with worried eyes. "What of the interview? Did you do well?" she asked after a few seconds of silence, hope flickering in her voice. Evelyn lowered her head. She waited for a while, struggling with her emotions. Then she exhaled deeply, inhaled again, gathering strength. "Mum, I didn't go to the interview again. I chose to save a life first," she said, her voice steady but heavy. Her mother stared at her for a moment, processing what she just heard. Then she shook her head slowly and said, "Is that why you are sounding that way? Another job will come. Don't worry, my daughter." Evelyn forced a small smile, but deep inside, she didn't know whether to feel relieved or more burdened. She wanted to tell her mother about the money she used, about the 50,000 naira she withdrew from the savings, but she didn't know how to start. She knew that her mother would not take it lightly. That money was not just money. It was months of sacrifice. Months of selling and saving, hoping for a better tomorrow. Before she could say anything more, her father's voice came from inside the room. "Who is with the woman now?" Evelyn turned her head towards the room and answered loudly, "No one, Papa. I came to check if there's any food in the house so that I can take it to her. She needs to eat when she wakes up." Okay, ask your mother, her father said. Then after a brief pause, he added, but you should be careful the way you help accident victims. This country is bad. If that woman had died, police would have stressed you with questions that you will even turn around regretting why you helped her. That's why people no longer help accident victims, to avoid unnecessary questions and trouble. Yes, Papa, Evelyn replied respectfully, although deep inside her heart she knew that even if another accident happened before her eyes, she would still help. It was in her nature. She couldn't ignore someone in need. Her mother stood up and went into the kitchen. She returned moments later with a plate of rice and stew, carefully covered. She handed it over to Evelyn. My regards to the woman. Come back when she wakes up, her mother said, her voice softer now. Evelyn took the plate and balanced it carefully in her hands. She turned to leave the compound. Just as she was stepping out of the gate, two of her friends, Rose and Linda, emerged from the corner, smiling excitedly. Evelyn, are you going out? Rose asked. Evelyn nodded without much enthusiasm. Okay, we came to tell you that we were hired, Linda announced, her eyes shining with excitement. The manager was so generous. Maybe he would have hired you too if you had gone for the interview, she added. Evelyn forced a smile. Well, thank God for you people. I am happy for you guys. Today isn't my luck, she said quietly. So what of the woman? Did she make it? Rose asked, her voice tinged with genuine curiosity. Yes, she made it. That's where I'm going to now. I want to take food for her, Evelyn replied, shifting the plate from one hand to another carefully. All right. Tell her that we said sorry, they chorused. Evelyn nodded and continued her journey. As she walked along the dusty road, the afternoon sun beating gently down on her, her heart grew heavier. Her mind kept replaying the conversation with her friends. She had missed an opportunity. A good one. She heard that the company was new and was paying their workers very well. It could have changed her life, her family's life. She shook her head slowly as she walked, assuring herself that she did the right thing. Saving a life was worth more than a job. It had to be. When she got back to the hospital, she hurried through the entrance and made her way to the emergency room. As she entered, her heart leapt with joy. The woman was awake. She was sitting up slightly, her back resting against the wall, looking around weakly. Evelyn almost ran to her side, her face lighting up with a grateful smile. She thanked God silently in her heart. She set the plate of food down on the small table beside the bed and gently approached the woman. She introduced herself and narrated everything that had happened. How the woman was hit by a car, how she had rushed her to the hospital, made the deposit, and stayed by her side. The woman listened with tears gathering in her eyes. She reached out and held Evelyn's hand tightly. Thank you. Thank you so much, my daughter. God bless you. I don't know what would have happened to me if not for you, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. The woman then reached for her bag, opened it slowly, and brought out her phone. She unlocked it and immediately dialed a number. I want to call my son, she said to Evelyn with a small smile. He will come immediately. Evelyn sat beside her, her heart lighter than it had been all day. Michael paced around his luxurious sitting room, unable to concentrate. His heart was heavy and his mind restless. Since morning, he had walked from one end of the city to the other, searching for his mother like a madman. He had been on a call with her earlier when her phone suddenly went off, and since then, it had remained unreachable. He had tried calling countless times, hoping that at least one call would go through, but it was always the same response, unavailable. It had spoiled his whole day, turned it upside down. He could not understand what could have happened to his mother. What kind of situation would make her phone go off and remain unreachable for this long? His mother was a careful woman, not the type to misplace her phone or let it die without warning. Something was wrong, he was sure of it. In his desperation, Michael had rushed to the nearest police station to make a report of a missing person. He explained everything to the officer on duty, expecting immediate action, but instead, they told him calmly to go home and wait. They said that it must be after 24 hours before someone could be officially declared missing. Michael had clenched his fists tightly, but said nothing more. He had no choice but to return to his estate, carrying with him the heavy burden of helplessness. Now he was back in his mansion, but peace was far from him. He paced from one end of the large, lavishly decorated sitting room to the other. His footsteps echoed softly against the expensive marble floors. The walls, adorned with beautiful paintings, seemed to close in on him. The golden curtains, the leather couches, the glittering chandeliers, none of them could offer him any comfort at that moment. He kept looking at the clock. Time seemed to crawl, each second stretching into hours. His mother was everything to him. She was the one who raised him single-handedly after his father's early death. She was the one who sacrificed everything to make sure he became somebody in life. And now, when he had finally made it, when he had just started his own company and was gradually building a name for himself, something like this had to happen. Michael knew how society worked. People were quick to judge, quick to spread rumors, especially about people like him, young men who had made money early in life. If anything should happen to his mother, he knew how tongues would wag. He could already hear the whispers. He used his mother for money rituals. It did not matter how clean his hands were. People would say what they wanted to say. And the fact that his mother was on her way to his house when the incident happened would only add fuel to their evil assumptions. He bit his finger anxiously and sat down for a while, but his body refused to be still. He stood up again and resumed pacing. His heart was pounding. His head was hot. His mind was filled with all sorts of terrifying thoughts. Where could his mother be at that moment? Was she safe? Was she crying for help? Was she lying somewhere in pain? He stopped pacing for a second, closed his eyes, and made the sign of the cross over his chest. "Please God, help me," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible but full of desperation. He opened his eyes and resumed his restless walk, waiting for a miracle to happen. The moment he opened his phone, his eyes caught on a post about a dead woman who was hit earlier by a speeding car. His heart jumped immediately. Fear gripped him like a hand around his throat. His hands shook as he tapped on the post to enlarge the picture. The more he looked, the more the image before him began to resemble his mother. His breathing became heavy, his heart raced like a drum. The woman's face was turned upside down, making it difficult to confirm, but deep inside him, something told him that the woman lying lifeless on that road was his mother. Sweat began to soak his entire body, drenching his fine clothes. His fingers trembled uncontrollably. He tried to steady himself, but he couldn't. His knees weakened and he almost slumped on the ground. His eyes remained glued to the image as tears gathered around them. It was her. The woman on the floor was actually his mother. That was his mother. His body froze. Then he screamed aloud, a loud, painful, broken scream that echoed around the sitting room. In his agony and confusion, he raised his phone up, ready to smash it against the tiled floor. But just as he was about to release the phone from his hand, it rang. He did not even know who was calling or how he managed to pick the call. Everything was like a dream. Everything was like a scene from a horror movie. His hands moved on their own, answering the call. All he knew, all he heard, was the familiar, sweet voice of his mother. "Michael, where are you?" his mother asked. His heart missed a beat. He quickly sprang up from where he was sitting, acting like someone under the influence of alcohol. His head spun, his legs felt like they no longer belonged to him. He did not say anything immediately. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Was that a ghost? Was that really his mother's voice? Or was he imagining things? Then the voice came again, even more desperate. "Michael, are you there? Michael." This time, he found his voice, although it came out cracked and weak. "Mama, I am here." "Where are you?" he managed to ask. "Come to Hope Hospital now, I had an accident," his mother said. Without another word, without thinking about anything else, Michael dashed out of his house. He did not care what he was wearing. He did not care whether he wore shoes or not. He did not care whether he locked his doors or left them wide open. All he knew was that his mother was alive and she needed him. And so he ran like a madman down the street. When he got to the hospital and found his mother alive, Michael rushed to her and hugged her so tight as if he would never let her go again. Tears began to fall freely from his eyes, soaking his mother's shoulder. He clung to her like a child, shaking with emotions too deep for words. He pulled back a little, his face still wet with tears, and began telling her everything. He told his mother how he had been walking around the whole city, going from one place to another, searching for her. How he could not eat, could not drink. How his heart almost stopped when he thought he had lost her forever. He told her how someone had posted her picture on the internet, declaring her dead, and how he had almost collapsed when he saw it. His mother listened quietly, her own heart filled with sorrow and gratitude. Then she pointed at Evelyn, who was standing quietly in a corner, watching the scene. "If not for this young girl," his mother said, her voice heavy with emotion, "I would have been dead by now. While others were busy snapping me and recording videos, it was only Evelyn that cared enough to save my life. It was only her who looked at me like a human being, not an object for entertainment. Michael turned to Evelyn. His eyes, still wet with tears, locked onto hers. Without thinking twice, he walked to her and grabbed her hands, holding them tightly. "Thank you," Michael said, his voice shaking. "You don't know what you have done for me. I will forever be grateful to you. Forever." He squeezed her hands gently before releasing them. Then he brought out his phone from his pocket, his hands still trembling a little. He opened the page that had posted his mother's picture and quickly typed under the post. "This woman is my mother, and she is not dead. Put down this image, or else I will report your page to Facebook, and they will take it down." Shortly after, the owner of the page replied, fear dripping from his words. "Please, I will take it down. Sorry for the inconveniences." Michael shook his head bitterly. He turned to his mother again and held her hand. His voice was filled with anger and sadness as he spoke. Life of social media is beginning to influence people so much these days. They care more for comments, likes, and views than they care for human beings. A woman was dying, and instead of helping her, they chose to record her. He hugged his mother again, holding her as if she would vanish if he let go. Evelyn shifted awkwardly, feeling it was time to leave. She didn't want to intrude into their private moment. "I have to go now," Evelyn said and sprang up quickly. "Thank you, my daughter." "Michael, go and see her off," Michael's mother said, her voice filled with gratitude and blessings. Michael nodded and followed Evelyn, determined not to let her leave without properly thanking her once again. Michael and Evelyn walked out of the hospital compound in silence. None of them said a word as they made their way past the busy hospital entrance, the noise of cars and people passing by sounding faint to their ears. But the moment they stepped outside the hospital gate, Michael turned to her and said, "Thank you very much." Evelyn nodded her head respectfully. "You have thanked me enough, sir," she said, her voice calm and modest. But Michael was not satisfied. He brought out his phone from his pocket and looked at her seriously. "Give me your account number." "Let me transfer the money," he said firmly. Evelyn called out the account number, and Michael quickly typed it into his phone. And before Evelyn could even put her phone properly back into her bag, an alert entered. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen, unable to say a word. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked at Michael in shock. "Sir, I only paid 50,000 naira, she managed to say, still staring at the figure on her phone. "Just take it," Michael replied immediately. "I can't thank you enough." The money he sent was 500,000 naira, 10 times what she had spent to save his mother's life. Evelyn could not believe her eyes. Then after a brief moment of silence, Michael said again, "If you don't mind, can I have your number? Maybe you will visit my mother another day." Evelyn, still overwhelmed by everything, gladly gave him her number. She felt honored, not just because of the money, but because they saw her as someone important enough to visit again. When Evelyn got home that night, her parents were so happy to see her. They noticed the glow on her face and knew something good must have happened. After she had settled down, Evelyn sat with her mother and told her everything that had happened at the hospital. She told her mother how she had used her savings of 50,000 naira to pay for the woman's hospital bills without even thinking twice, and how later, the woman's son had wanted to pay her back, but instead gave her 500,000 naira. Her parents were so happy. Her mother clapped her hands together, praising and thanking God for remembering their family. Her father raised his hands towards the ceiling, praying loudly and thanking God for his goodness and mercies. They could not hide their joy. That money was a miracle to them. The next day, early in the morning, Evelyn's mother insisted on following her back to the hospital to properly thank the woman and her son for the help and blessings they had given them. Evelyn agreed, and together they went back to the hospital, carrying fruits and a small gift they had quickly arranged. But when they got to the hospital and asked for the woman, the nurses told them that the woman had already been discharged and had left the hospital earlier that morning. Evelyn and her mother stood there for a moment, holding the fruits in their hands, not knowing what to say. Even though they could not thank her face to face again, their hearts were full of gratitude. Weeks later, Evelyn and Michael sat at a small eatery. The place was simple, with plastic chairs and wooden tables, but it was quiet enough for them to talk. Michael had called her that afternoon to know if there was anything he could do for her. Since that day at the hospital, he had been thinking about her. He had noticed from the look on her face when he sent the money that she needed more. Money alone could not solve everything. He wanted to know her story. "You haven't told me how you met my mum that early morning. Where were you going to?" Michael asked, looking at her with genuine curiosity. "I was on my way to an interview, But I missed it, Evelyn said, lowering her eyes to the table. You missed your interview just to save my mother. Incredible. You are an angel. Are you a graduate? Michael asked again, leaning forward. No, I am not. It was a new open company that was looking for cleaners, Evelyn said softly. What's the name of the company? Michael questioned further. Morgan's Executive Plastic Company, Evelyn replied. The moment Evelyn said it, Michael chuckled. A low, soft laugh that made Evelyn look up in confusion. That's my company, he said casually. What? Evelyn asked, her eyes wide with shock. I am Michael Morgan. I named the company after my late dad, he said with a soft smile. Silence settled between them for a moment. Neither of them spoke. The reality of how small the world could be hung in the air like a thick cloud. Evelyn stared at him, trying to digest the information. After a while, Michael spoke again. His voice was calm but serious. Do you want to further your education? He asked. Yes, sir. My dream in life is to become a doctor. To save lives, but my parents don't have money, Evelyn said, her voice quivering slightly with emotion. Michael smiled warmly and said, Then consider yourself a doctor. I will sponsor your education. Evelyn's eyes widened in shock. What? She screamed, drawing the attention of a few people in the eatery. Yes, you heard me right, Michael said with a bright smile. Evelyn didn't know when she stood up from her chair and rushed over to him. Without thinking, she gave him a tight hug. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes as she held on to him. Her dream that once looked so impossible was now standing in front of her, promising to come true. But had missed the interview just to save her life. He also told her about her dreams, how she wanted to be a doctor, and how he had promised to sponsor her education. As he spoke, his mother's face lit up with deep thought and emotions. He was surprised when his mother suddenly said, A girl like her deserves more. What are you saying, Mum? Michael questioned immediately, confused at her words. Marry her, his mother said without hesitation. What? Michael screamed, unable to believe what he had just heard. Yes, make her your wife. I want her to be my daughter. She's a good girl. What more could a man want in a woman if not someone like that girl? Marry her and I will be the happiest woman on earth, his mother said again, her voice firm but filled with love. Michael stared at her, his mouth slightly open. Then he smiled and said, Then consider it done, Mum. I will talk to her. 2 days later, Michael picked up his phone, his hands a bit shaky but determined. He called Evelyn. When she picked up, he wasted no time in telling her his intentions. Saying no doesn't mean that I won't help you fulfill your dreams. I will understand if you don't want to marry me, Michael said, his voice calm and sincere. He meant every word he said. But after a brief few seconds of silence on the other end, Evelyn said, I will marry you. Michael's heart leaped for joy. He could barely believe his ears. The next day, Michael took Evelyn to a very big hotel. A place adorned with beautiful lights, fountains, and soft music playing in the background. There, right in front of everyone, Michael knelt down and proposed to her. Evelyn covered her mouth in shock, her eyes clouded with tears of joy. She said yes, and Michael slipped the ring into her finger. They both felt so happy. Their hearts beat as one, their dreams intertwined by fate and destiny. Months later, they got married. It was a rich wedding, the kind that made headlines. The top of the society came, dignitaries, business moguls, celebrities. They all came to witness the union of Michael Morgan and Evelyn, the girl who had once been a nobody but had now become a queen in her own right. After the wedding, Evelyn went back to school. She studied with all her heart and soul, and years later, she graduated as a doctor. Her dream wasn't just a mere dream anymore. It had turned into reality. Finally, she wore the white coat she had been admiring since childhood. Every day, she thanked Michael for bringing her dream to life. And Michael, on his own part, would thank her for keeping his mother alive. Their lives were knitted with gratitude, love, and the memories of how a single act of kindness changed everything forever.